The transmission crackled with static before the chilling voice of the Galactic Council echoed through the President's secure office. This is your final warning, Earth. Disarm your weapons, cease your expansion, or face eradication. President Sarah Lee stood motionless, the weight of the words settling like a lead weight in her chest. She stared at the screen as the image of Svan, the Council's representative, flickered with cold detachment. His alien features, sharp, angular, and unnervingly serene, were designed to intimidate. Lee's eyes narrowed. Your council killed a child, she said, her voice steady but laced with a growing fury. One of ours. What makes you think you have the right? Svan's face betrayed no emotion. That human child violated the principles of the galactic peace. An anomaly too dangerous to exist. The Council decided that you, too, are now a threat. We will act accordingly. Lee clenched her fists, her gaze never leaving the screen. For the first time in her political career, she felt the raw surge of a primal urge, protectiveness. The child had been innocent, a mere human on a neutral space station, yet the Council had decided that even the possibility of another dangerous anomaly was unacceptable. We won't let you destroy us, she said, the words leaving her mouth like a battle cry. The transmission cut off, and silence filled the room, but Lee's thoughts raged like a storm. The child's death was a declaration of war. They would never be safe as long as the Council existed, and the human's unyielding existence would be viewed as a threat to the status quo. Ma'am? A soft voice broke the silence. Lee turned to see Admiral Harris standing in the doorway, his rugged frame casting a long shadow. His face was etched with years of battle scars, physical and emotional. His eyes, though, were a quiet storm, sharp with understanding. Admiral, she greeted him, her tone softening only slightly. She had known Harris long enough to trust him without hesitation, but this was a moment where no one could be fully trusted. Not even herself. Harris stepped inside and closed the door behind him, his boots making little noise on the polished floor. I've been briefed, he said simply, his voice low and calm. The Galactic Council has drawn a line in the sand, and they expect us to back down. Lee's eyes darted to the view outside her office, where the sky was a canvas of broken clouds, the distant glow of humanity's space stations just visible against the stars. Humanity had always been a second-class citizen in the galactic order, but this was different. We need to act, she said, moving away from the screen and walking toward the desk. She was no longer speaking to him, but to herself, trying to ground her thoughts. We can't wait for them to strike first. I know, Harris replied, the weight of his words heavy with experience. But what do you want to do, Sarah? They have fleets. Dreadnoughts. Warships. Lee turned back to him. And we have a forgotten past. A fleet buried beneath the ice, long thought lost. An old weapon from Earth's own history. My father used to speak of it, of the ancient ships built for a war no one remembers. But they exist, Admiral. And now, they're our only hope. Harris stiffened at the mention of the fleet, his expression unreadable. I thought those were just myths. Your father believed in legends. No one thought there was any truth to them. Well, Lee said, a grim smile tugging at the corner of her lips, he was wrong. And I'm about to prove it. The Admiral stepped forward, his boots echoing softly in the quiet room. If it's true, he said, his voice tinged with disbelief, then we're talking about a weapon that could turn the tide in our favor. But we'd have to find it. We'd have to wake it up. And we'd need a hell of a lot more than just a theory. Lee nodded, her heart pounding with the realization that she was about to ask Harris to do the impossible. I need you to lead a team to Antarctica, Admiral. The fleet's buried there. You'll find it, and you'll bring it online. If we can pull this off, we'll have a chance at survival. Harris's gaze softened, the weight of the request settling between them like a quiet understanding. I'll assemble a team, he said, his voice resolute. But we don't have much time. The Council is already preparing its strike. Lee stepped closer to him, her voice dropping to a whisper. The Council made a mistake, Ash. They underestimated us. They underestimated humanity. For the first time in the conversation, Harris allowed a slight smile to flicker at the edge of his lips. They'll learn. Earth never backs down. As Harris left the room, Lee stood by the window, staring out at the stars once again. The weight of the decision she had made rested heavy on her shoulders. This wasn't just about survival, it was about proving to the universe that humanity would never be extinguished, no matter the odds. She had seen too many battles lost, too many innocent lives taken, and now, the time had come to fight back. The Earth would not be a footnote in galactic history. It would be a force to be reckoned with. The air in Antarctica was thick with tension, the cold biting through layers of clothing as Admiral Harris surveyed the barren landscape. His team was already assembling, packing equipment into armored vehicles with meticulous precision. Behind them, a dormant hangar loomed, the entrance a stark contrast to the surrounding icy wilderness. If Lee's words were to be believed, this was the beginning of a war they couldn't afford to lose. Harris had always been a pragmatist. A seasoned soldier, he had seen humanity at its worst, battling alien forces with limited resources and desperation. But today felt different. There was a glimmer of something deeper in the air, a promise of vengeance, of rediscovering what had long been buried. His communicator crackled to life, and a voice that was too familiar spoke. "Admiral, we're all set for the dig. But I've got something you should see," said Lieutenant Morgan, one of his trusted officers. Harris looked up, meeting the lieutenant's determined gaze. "What's the situation?" Morgan nodded toward a nearby rock outcrop. "We've got movement. We're not alone." Before Harris could respond, the ground beneath them rumbled. A low, vibrating hum filled the air, and the snow around them shifted unnaturally. He instinctively raised a hand to his ear, speaking into his comm status report, "Now." The voice that came back was strained. "We've got drones incoming, Admiral. A lot of them. The Council knows we're here." Harris cursed under his breath. The Galactics weren't known for their patience, but he hadn't expected them to strike this soon. His mind raced as he quickly scanned the horizon. There was no time to waste. They needed to get to the fleet before the Council could bring their full might to bear. "All units, move to the entrance." "Now," he barked. The team sprang into action, pushing their vehicles forward, the tires skidding on the icy ground. Behind them, the dark silhouettes of incoming drones loomed in the distance. As they neared the hangar's entrance, Harris's mind flashed back to the conversation with President Lee. The moment she had revealed the existence of the fleet, something had shifted in him. This wasn't just another mission. This was the turning point for humanity. But even so, the reality of the situation was sinking in. The Council wasn't just going to stand by and let them reactivate the fleet. They would do everything in their power to prevent it. Morgan's voice interrupted his thoughts. "Admiral, we need to make a decision fast. The drones are closing in." Harris gritted his teeth. "We'll be ready for them. This is our only chance. Get the team in position. I'll handle the drones." The vehicles skidded to a halt just outside the entrance, and Harris leaped from his seat, quickly assessing their position. The hangar loomed before them, a massive structure buried beneath the ice. But the drones were almost upon them, small, agile, and deadly. He could see their shapes darting through the snow, their sensors trained on the convoy. Without hesitating, Harris slammed his hand down on the emergency panel, causing the hangar doors to grind open, revealing the darkened interior beyond. "Move, move, move," he shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. The team poured into the hangar, diving for cover as laser fire erupted from the drones above. Harris sprinted ahead, eyes scanning the sky for the incoming threats. His breath came out in white clouds, the frigid air sharp against his skin, but there was no time to think about it. His focus was on the battle. The drones buzzed overhead, their weapons flashing with deadly intent. Harris ducked behind an abandoned control station, heart racing as the first shots whizzed past. One of the drones exploded into a brilliant fireball, taken down by a carefully placed missile from Sergeant Jameson's vehicle. "Good shot," Harris shouted over his shoulder, but Jameson didn't have time for a reply. The drone numbers were overwhelming, and the clock was ticking. The fleet, buried deep beneath the ice, was humanity's last hope, but without getting to it in time, there would be nothing left to fight for. As the final drone fell from the sky, Harris turned his attention back to the hangar's depths. The fleet waited. Ancient ships, dormant for millennia, were buried under tons of snow and ice, but they were here. They had to be here. "We're inside," Harris said, speaking to Morgan and the rest of the team through his comm. "Let's get to work. We'll have to be quick." The team moved with urgency, hands steady despite the chaos that had unfolded outside. As they advanced deeper into the hangar, the cold began to take on a different quality, as if the chill itself was infused with the memory of forgotten wars. The walls were lined with ancient markings, alien symbols from a time before humanity's rise in the stars. The ships were huge, their forms unrecognizable in the dim light. But to Harris, they felt like home. These ships were humanity's legacy, their defiance carved into every inch of their hulls. Morgan's voice came through his comm. "Admiral, you'd better take a look at this." Harris moved toward the officer, who stood in front of a control panel, frozen in awe. The screen flickered to life as the ancient machinery hummed with energy, its systems slowly awakening. Is it working?" Harris asked, the words heavy with disbelief. "It's working," Morgan confirmed, his voice barely a whisper. "We found it." The hum in the air grew louder, resonating in Harris's bones as the ships, dormant for centuries, began to stir. This was it, the beginning of humanity's last stand. The hum from the ancient ships was becoming deafening now, the sound vibrating through the hangar's cold steel walls. Harris stood in the center, his breath visible in the frosty air, his heart hammering in his chest. The machines that had once been a symbol of forgotten Earth's might were waking up. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, their systems flickered to life, the dormant power surging through their veins like blood re-entering a frozen heart. Lieutenant Morgan stood beside him, eyes wide, tracing the symbols that lined the walls with reverence. "These markings," he said, his voice barely audible over the growing noise, "they're human. Ancient Earth technology. This is beyond anything I've ever seen." Harris didn't have the time to digest the significance of the moment. The Council was coming. They wouldn't wait much longer. Every minute they spent marveling at these relics was another minute the enemy gained. "Status report." Harris barked into his comm, his voice sharp, cutting through the tension. "Systems are coming online, Admiral," Morgan answered, his voice tinged with awe. "Engines, weapons, shields. They're all functional. The fleet's waking up." Harris nodded, suppressing the surge of hope that threatened to break through his steely exterior. "Can we pilot them?" Morgan hesitated. "I don't know. We've only just started interfacing with their systems. It's going to take time. A lot of time." "No time," Harris muttered. "We need to get these ships airborne. Now. If we don't act fast, the Council's warships will tear through us before we even get off the ground." He turned to the rest of the team, already working with a sense of urgency, as the massive shadows of the ancient ships loomed behind them. The structures were imposing, their sleek forms unlike anything they had ever seen, even among the most advanced human ships. They were a relic of Earth's most ambitious era, long buried under ice and time. A fleet designed for war, buried by the very people who had created it, and now it was their salvation. Harris moved towards the closest vessel, his boots crunching on the ice that had settled thickly over the hangar floor. He could feel the cold seep into his bones, but there was no time for discomfort. There were bigger threats at play. Morgan followed him, eyes scanning the console as he typed commands into a control panel. "It's not perfect, but I think I can get us some basic controls. We'll need to run diagnostics on every single system once we're airborne. We'll figure it out in the air," Harris said, his tone final. "Get us moving." Morgan gave a sharp nod, fingers flying across the console. The ship's engines sputtered at first, coughing and grumbling to life, but then, with a deep, resonant roar, they came alive. Harris could feel the vibrations through the floor, through the air, as if the very ground beneath them was trembling in response to the ship's awakening. As the engines rumbled, a distant sound reached their ears, soft at first, then growing louder. Harris stiffened. The Council wasn't waiting any longer. Their warships were coming in fast, and they were angry. "Get everyone on board," Harris snapped, already moving toward the ramp. "We need to launch now." The rest of the team rushed to their designated ships, scrambling to prepare for flight. The hangar doors had been sealed shut when they'd arrived, but now they groaned as they began to open, the enormous metal doors grinding against the ice. The team's vehicles rolled out first, taking up position in a defensive formation, but the ships would have to follow immediately. Harris reached the open ramp of one of the vessels, his fingers twitching as he ran them along the smooth metal of the hull. For a moment, he allowed himself a brief flash of thought. This was Earth's legacy. Their hope. His ancestors had built these machines, and now it was his turn to pilot them. There was no turning back. Inside, the cockpit was dimly lit, its systems flickering on as the ship hummed to life around him. The console in front of him came to life with lines of data scrolling at dizzying speeds. This was a machine of war, built for unimaginable power, and it was now his to command. Morgan's voice crackled over the comm. "Admiral, the Council ships are nearly in range. If we don't get airborne in the next 3 minutes, we'll be sitting ducks." Harris slammed his hand on the activation button, the ship's engines roaring to life beneath him. The vessel shuddered as it began to lift off, its massive form rising into the frigid air. Outside, the battlefield was rapidly taking shape. Through the viewport, Harris saw the Council's warships, massive, imposing, their sleek forms cutting through the clouds like predatory birds. They were fast, far faster than any Earth vessel, but they hadn't anticipated humanity's ace in the hole. These ships might have been ancient, but they were far from obsolete. "Hold tight," Harris muttered, his fingers tightening on the controls. "It's time to show them why they shouldn't have underestimated us." The ship lurched forward, tearing through the icy atmosphere with a deafening roar. The roar of ancient engines, of Earth's forgotten might, now reawakened. As they soared through the sky, Harris's eyes flicked to the radar. The Council's fleet was coming closer. But he wasn't worried. Not anymore. They had one chance to prove to the universe that Earth was not to be ignored. They would fight, they would survive, and they would win. Or they would die trying. The battle had just begun. The roar of the ancient engines filled the cockpit, shaking Harris to his core. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the chill of space, his hands gripping the controls as the massive Earth fleet tore through the cold expanse. They were outnumbered, outgunned, but for the first time since humanity's first encounters with the galactic powers, they had the upper hand. "Admiral, enemy ships on intercept course, 2 minutes to impact," Morgan's voice crackled over the comm. Harris's eyes flicked over the console, his mind calculating every possible outcome. The Council's fleet was relentless, a wall of firepower bearing down on them. Their warships were vast, designed for one thing, utter domination. But they hadn't counted on Earth's hidden weapon, the fleet of ancient warships, built by humanity's ancestors, buried under layers of ice for centuries, now reawakened to defend the planet they had abandoned. "We're not running," Harris muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. His fingers flew across the controls. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers. We're not going down without a fight." Morgan's voice sounded uncertain but determined. "Understood. Let's give them everything we've got." Outside the viewport, the Council ships loomed closer, their massive forms blocking out the stars. Their shields hummed as their weapons powered up, glowing with destructive intent. Harris felt the weight of what was at stake. This wasn't just a battle for survival, it was a fight for Earth's place in the galaxy. If they failed, Earth would become a footnote in galactic history. But if they succeeded, they would rewrite everything. They would show the universe that humanity wasn't just a fringe species to be ignored. "Full power to shields," Harris ordered. "Target their engines. Don't let them follow us." The ship shuddered as its weapons systems activated. The first shot fired, a blinding flash of energy that struck one of the Council ships head-on. It staggered backward, shields flaring, but remained intact. Harris cursed. They weren't going to fall that easily. They're tough, Morgan observed, tension clear in his voice. But not invincible. A new energy filled Harris, a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. These ships may have been dormant for millennia, but the people who had built them had known how to fight. They had the same tenacity that humanity possessed today, a will to survive, to push back, to never surrender. Keep firing, Harris ordered. We can do this. We have to do this. Another volley of shots erupted from their side, striking one of the Council warships in the flank. This time, it flinched. Harris smiled grimly. They had found their target. The seconds stretched into eternity as the battle raged around them. The Council ships fired back, their beams of energy lancing through space like streaks of lightning. Harris danced around the attacks, the ship's hull vibrating with every near miss, but his mind remained sharp. Every maneuver, every shot, was calculated, deliberate. This is it, Harris muttered, seeing the Council warship's shields begin to flicker. They were weakening. He slammed his fist on the control panel. All forward power. Take them down. The final, decisive moment arrived in a blinding flash. Their fleet's combined firepower ripped through the weakened shields of the largest Council ship, and with a deafening explosion, the vessel erupted into fire and debris. Harris didn't wait to watch it burn. The battle wasn't over yet. We've got more coming in, Morgan warned. We're not done yet. Harris's heart pounded in his chest. We won't be. Keep firing. The Earth fleet surged forward with renewed intensity, each ship now fully synchronized, its ancient systems aligning with the tactical genius of the modern humans at the helm. They weren't just surviving, they were pushing back. The enemy had expected Earth to be easy prey. They had underestimated the power of a species that had once ruled the stars. Minutes passed like hours as the battle escalated, but Harris could feel it turning in their favor. Slowly, the Council ships began to fall back, their ranks thinning, their fire less frequent. It was a slow, agonizing process, but victory was on the horizon. Then, as if the universe had decided to test humanity one final time, a voice cut through the chaos. It was Lee, the President, her voice trembling with urgency. Admiral, we've received a message from the Council's leadership. They want to negotiate a ceasefire. They're willing to recognize Earth's sovereignty. Harris didn't hesitate. He knew what they had to do. Tell them no, he said, his voice hard. We've fought for this, we've bled for this, and we will not be cowed. Tell them to surrender unconditionally. There was a long pause, then Lee's voice returned, calmer now. Understood, Admiral. I'll relay the message. The comms went silent, but the message had been sent. Harris watched the final Council ship retreat, its lights dimming in the distance. The battle was over. He sat back in his chair, his body trembling from the adrenaline crash. They had done it. Earth had won. Admiral, Morgan said, his voice hoarse. We actually did it. Harris smiled, though the weight of the victory settled heavily on his shoulders. Humanity never quits, he said softly. Never forget that. The fleet turned back toward Earth, victorious, and as Harris gazed out at the stars, he knew one thing for certain, this was only the beginning. The galaxy would never forget the name of Earth.